National Public Radio, NPR, where the news is what we say is the news.
Welcome to the VJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brand John never wants to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the VJ Show. VJ Show.
John, I had another complaint about our intro again.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
another one.
Are
we supposed to care what the complaint is?
Well, yeah, the lose control people were complaining about the fact that we're targeting older adults and making fun of them because they're losing control. You know, what do they call that? Dependencies or something like that. Is that what it is?
They are dependents. That's for sure. Yeah. It's okay, Brad. I mean, a little bit of controversy won't kill us. I mean, it certainly hasn't been hurting us lately.
That is John Combest, Combest. I spelled the name because you need to type that into your computer or put that into your phone, Combest. Put a John in front of it, johncombest.com. You will end up at his website. Nothing flashy, no videos, no high-tech graphics, no artificial information whatsoever. Just real information about the top stories that John has, shall we say, culled. Is that a good term, culled?
That's a great word. It reminds me of bass fishing. Let's use cull more often, Brad.
Culled from all over the state of Missouri. But what we do is we start the show off with the aid of this guy.
I'm Casey Kasem.
And what he does is...
we're on our way to the number one.
And he also says things like...
their stories coming up.
And he also says things like...
and here they are.
And he also says things like...
now on with the countdown.
And then he says...
in third place...
one of my favorite Brad Hildebrand tropes. Imagine Brad, just, roughly, I guess that would be maybe 70 years ago. Brad, at your high school graduation, 70 plus years ago. One of my favorite tropes of yours is when you say, I can't just imagine going back to when I graduated from high school. If you would tell me that this was legal and that was legal and this was legal, I'd be like, come on, man. And Timothy Leary wasn't even doing LSD back then, Brad. But to use one of your favorite cliches, Brad, you couldn't imagine that in 2024, a high school Brad Hildebrand would be able to just traipse into the girls' shower room and just do whatever Brad wants to do in the shower room. Well, Brad, your fantasy comes to an end maybe Thursday, because once again, the Francis Howell School District is killing the dreams of teenage boys and is considering, Brad, banning them from women's locker rooms and from women's showers and from women's bathrooms. Now, if this sounds oppressive to you, Brad, I happen to agree. I don't know why we can't have an 18-year-old boy in a girl's shower room or in a girl's bathroom. But the Francis Howell School District is once again going to consider it. And once again, Brad, people will stand up and say, why can't people use whatever bathroom they want to use? So that meeting is Thursday night, Brad. Expect to hear more controversy. We'll hear more from bigots who say that boys shouldn't be in girls' locker rooms. And then we'll have heroes like you and I staying up and say, let that boy in the locker room. You get what I'm saying, Brad?
John, you make fun of me because, you call it one of my favorite tropes, because think about it. It is true that when I graduated from high school, if some guy would come up to me and said, hey, son, you've got the world in front of you in the state of Missouri because there's going to be legalized gambling and there's going to be lottery and there's going to be legalized sale of marijuana and probably in the year 2024, legalized sports betting. I go, dude, get out of here. Okay, but you did ask a question, what would have happened in my high school days if a dude would have ended up in the women's locker room in the shower? First off, he probably would have been beat severely by some of the male teachers who would go in and retrieve him. He might even be beat severely by some of the female teachers that would go in. And secondly, he would be riding down to Clayton in the back of a St. Louis County police car. I mean, come on. Am I kidding about that?
And you're absolutely right about that. And just even recall, Brad, even back in your days, the female gym teachers, if you chose to be a gym teacher in the 1970s, a female gym teacher, you could probably do a few squats and lunges. You get what I'm saying?
Well, once again, I mean, my initiation. You get me going. Let me tell a quick story. My initiation into gym class was 7th grade at Kirby Junior High. Okay, and our coach was named. Are you ready for this?
Mm-hmm.
Coach Cruel. And I am not exaggerating. K-R-U-E-L, Coach Cruel. And he lived up to his name. And when our very first day of gym class, we're all in our brand new gym suits because remember, we're 7th graders. We've never had gym suits before. We never were in a locker room before, so it's all uncharted territory for us. He essentially tells us that if we get out of line, and back in the days of Kirby Junior High, in the gym, there was the bleachers that pulled out, but there was like a mezzanine. Did you go to that school?
Brad, I went to the same gym. I know exactly what you mean.
So there was a mezzanine, and there were concrete steps that went up to the mezzanine level, okay? And Coach Cruel told us if we got out of line, he was going to make us run those steps until we could not walk anymore. And he told about the story about there were several students of his that got out of line in his class, and he had them run the steps until they couldn't walk anymore. And they literally crawled out of gym class. So all of us were like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. So then he proceeds to walk over to the pull-up bar with his clipboard in his left hand. He jumps up, grabs the pull-up bar with one hand, and rips off about 10 pull-ups. And we're all going, we don't want to mess with this guy. We don't want to mess with this guy. So that was my induction. And I'm telling you, if in junior high, if a dude would have snuck into the women's locker room and gone into the shower, because back in the day, even in junior high, we took showers.
I remember.
Remember? I mean, I can imagine Coach Cruel pulling that guy out by his hair. You know what I'm telling you?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. One anecdote, real quick, Brad. While I know we're into the top 3 right now, but I will give this anecdote because you brought up the Kirby Junior High locker rooms. I think any young man who grew up who was in middle school prior to the 2000s will remember this. Brad, do you remember spray deodorant?
Oh, yeah.
So today, anytime I smell anything that reminds me faintly of spray deodorant, I'm taken back to the Kirby Junior High locker room, when after and before gym class, the room was just a fog of right guard. And kids today will never appreciate the fact that today you apply antiperspirant under your arms, generally in stick fashion. But back in the day, a lot of people would just spray a fog of it, generally in the vicinity of their body, and consider themselves fine. And it's just, the amount of aerosol we consumed back then.
John, and
the moral of the story, Brad, is, and the other thing that I would pull out from this point, so St. Louis Public Radio, of course, covered this. Monica Obradovic from the Post-Dispatch covered it. There is it seems like an obvious answer of having single stall individual restrooms. But that is not good enough, Brad, because a woman who is raising her daughter to be a boy says that there's not enough of them on campus. Like, you need to have more single stall bathrooms. Imagine the construction costs for that, Brad.
Is this the
gender neutral bathrooms? Go ahead, Brad.
Is this the same thing at Francis Howell? Is that what you're saying? They should have
single
single stall.
Yeah, I should go back. I should be clear that it's at Francis Howell. So we'll see more of this. It would seem rational to say, okay, if you want to be a boy today or a girl tomorrow, then use a gender neutral bathroom. But Brad, as we've seen in other instances, it's never good enough. Like, that's never going to be a good enough answer to a lot of these people. So expect more controversy about this, Brad.
Well, John, quickly, I think I mentioned this once before. The guy used to be the president of Lindenwood, and I didn't know him well. I knew him because he was at a couple events I was at, and really a nice guy. And I'm not going to say his name. I do remember his name, but I don't want to somewhat embarrass him because he's no longer there. He got into a fight with the it got sort of serious. I mean, they weren't punching each other or anything like that, but he got into a fight with the same type of people about they wanted gender neutral bathrooms in all the buildings in Lindenwood. Now, once again, can you imagine the construction costs? How many buildings are in Lindenwood? I mean, I don't know. There's
unbelievable.
I mean, it would have been why probably hundreds of millions of dollars, because anytime you go into especially a commercial building, it's not like a residential where you knock out some wall, you knock out some plasterboard and you whack out a couple 2x4s and you move the base plate and the sill plate over here and you put the 2x4s back up and you know what I mean, you've got a room moved. It's not that way in a commercial building, especially with plumbing. And
I mean, but I think their argument, the transgender argument, would be, because you're making us separate, that does not make us equal. Like, there's no reason why a young boy who wants to be a girl should have to stay out of the girls' locker room because he wants to feel like he's part of the girl group. You get what I'm saying? Like, you can't say that single stall bathrooms are separate but equal, because they're not. You're denying them the chance to fraternize with their fellow females.
Here's what needs to happen. There needs to be a superintendent who would come out of the WWE, and he would, like who would be like Ric Flair be like a good example. Ric Flair.
Let's use John Cena because he's stronger.
Okay, John Cena. I'm John Cena. I'm the new superintendent of the France South School District. Okay, listen up. You come to school to learn. You come to school to effing learn. And if you don't effing learn, that's all we care about. We don't care about what happens in the gym. We don't care about what bathroom you go to. You come here to effing learn. Now, crack the books and get to work. Okay? Do you think that would work?
That would be beautiful. And there's probably no better way to train students, Brad, than having John Cena yell at them about, I don't know, STEM and geospatial learning. You think, is Casey around?
Oh, I bet she is.
Up a notch to number 2.
There are folks who go to Washington, D.C. and bloviate, and then there are folks that actually get stuff done and get stuff passed. And it appears, Brad, that Eric Schmitt is falling into that latter camp of actually passing stuff and actually getting stuff done. By the way, this is not called the Corey Busch School of Washington, D.C. This might be called the Eric Schmitt School of Washington, D.C. Eric Schmitt has passed a bill through 2 congressional committees that would bring roughly $5 million in additional defense funding back to the St. Louis area. Yeah, by the way, Corey Busch's ears just rang because she's like, what do you mean supporting national defense? These would be for jobs and job training at the National Geospatial he announced this at the National Geospatial Innovation Hub, and which is colloquially known as NGA West. So let me be accurate here. It would be administered through the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, St. Louis location, NGA West. By the way, there's pieces up today. Probably the best piece, Brad, is from KSDK. I watched that piece by Mark Maxwell. St. Louis Public Radio also has a piece up as well. But anyway, this would be training folks for these geospatial jobs. I believe, Brad, that this is formerly at the old Carter Carburetor site. I think that's where the new site is, right?
What, for geospatial?
Yeah, in North City. Isn't that where Carter Carburetor used to be?
No. This is up in the area that what's his face bought, McKee bought. This is actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is in an area that primarily most of the property that they're doing this on was formerly residential property.
I see. Okay, I had that wrong. I guess I'm thinking of Carter Carburetor. Maybe that was a Superfund site. So Eric Schmitt brings this money back to Missouri. He had an event yesterday with a lot of those local folks who were in that STEM and in that geospatial and AI and all that tech area. So it's good news for North St. Louis, Brad.
Yeah, you're correct that the Carter Carburetor plant site was a Superfund site as well too. So you didn't miss that as well, because all the different chemicals that seep through the floor of the Carter Carburetor plant, right across from Busch Stadium number 2. And by the way, I a little history nugget. Did you I didn't realize this, but the numbering system for Busch Stadium is all off. Did you know this?
Well, we're in Busch 3 now, right?
Technically, we're in Busch 4, but that's a whole nother story.
No way,
yeah,
really?
It's interesting thing, and the interesting thing was that the Busch Stadium was originally owned by the Browns, and the Cardinals rented it, which is sort of interesting, and they played in another stadium previous to that. So anyway, that's
now. But when you count Busch, so you're counting Busch number 3 as Trudy Busch Valentine when she was a girl after the VP ball. She had her dad build a little something in the backyard for the neighborhood boys. You're counting that as 3, right? And then now we're in 4.
No. That wasn't.
Are you sure?
A little thing in the backyard, which was 20,000 square feet for the Bushes, right? Okay, it's on to number 1.
The number 1.
I think this is the first time, Brad, that in the top 3 stories that you and I discuss in A Block every morning, we had a letter to the editor. But today we have a letter to the editor from a former U.S. attorney from Eastern District of Missouri, a gentleman named Richard Callahan. And does that name ring a bell at all, Brad?
Boy, it does. Why is that name familiar?
He was a long-term prominent Democrat, and he was originally from Cole County. I guess he is still from Cole County. He was elected for many decades as a judge, as a prosecutor, as a Democrat, and he served in the Obama administration. I bring this up, Brad, because he has a letter in the Post-Dispatch about Michael Brown and about Ferguson, and the headline is, remember, headlines are generally written by the Post-Dispatch, but the headline is, 10 years later, false narratives still surround Michael Brown. And Judge Callahan goes through and talks about the silly notion of hands up, don't shoot, which was instantly disproven, and then subsequently disproven by St. Louis investigations, federal investigations, talks about how irresponsible it is to lump cigarillo thief Michael Brown in with legitimate victims of police brutality and police abuse of power. And I bring this up, Brad, because Richard Callahan was and is a Democrat. And a lot of times, Brad, you and I, and many of us, let's just put the accountability on me. Many times I will say things like, well, Democrats are supporting whatever, cause de célèbre of the moment. But we should remember that there are still Democrats who will see things like Michael Brown, who will see things like this Ferguson officer fighting for his life and stand up and say, no, that's not right. And so I think it's just a good reminder to see Richard Callahan taking time out of, I presume that if he's not retired, he's got to be close to retirement at this point, a real gentleman and a proud Democrat stand up and say, look, here's the truth about some of these social justice warriors. And I think it takes a lot of courage. And critics, Brad, would say, there's part of me that says, well, we should be congratulating him for just speaking the truth. But I think in 2024, to self-identify as a Democrat and criticize Black Lives Matter and the whole victimhood movement, I think it takes a lot of courage. So that's why that's our number 1 story today, Brad.
Interesting because of the fact, a couple things. First off, every once in a while, I haven't heard it recently, but every once in a while I will still hear a news report of the murder of Michael Brown. And I think it was proven beyond a shadow of a doubt by 3 levels of investigation. Originally, it was the Bob McCullough and the St. Louis County grand jury, and then it was something federal, and then it was, I think, the FBI. Wasn't there 3 levels of?
Yeah, it was Eric Holder's investigation.
Right, which proved that the original verdict that was gotten. Well, yeah, it was 3 years, 3 levels of investigation, because remember, it was originally Bob McCullough, St. Louis County prosecutor. Then it was the FBI, and then remember Wesley Bell, as part of his campaign, for running for prosecuting attorney, he said he was going to reopen the Michael Brown case. Remember?
You're right, Brad.
And he did reopen the Michael Brown case, and it came down to, guess what? Those 2 previous investigations were correct. There was provocation on Michael Brown's, part, and essentially the police officer, the Ferguson police officer, who I won't mention his name because he's had his name drugged through the mud too much. Essentially, it was self-defense on his part because he felt his life was being threatened by Michael Brown. So 3 different investigations with the same result. Okay, now I tell you what, let's carry this over into the B block, because I listened to the Ferguson Chief Police yesterday afternoon on Mark Reardon's show, and it was, I have to tell you this, I don't know who this guy is. I know his name, you know his name, but
yeah,
I feel like driving up to Ferguson, finding this guy and shaking his hand and essentially saying, dude, I know the world is against you, but there are some people that are for you. And one of them is right here shaking your hand. Because, he was so incredibly sincere. I mean, you could tell on the phone Well, we'll talk about it in B Block, okay? I mean, there's sometimes you hear, and this is the thing that bothers me, and John knows what I'm talking about. You hear the professional spokespeople, who are, well, this is exactly what happened, and it happened like this. First off, at 6:22 and 32 seconds, they are so divorced, they have no emotional content to them. They're like robots.
They're robots. Yeah, they're robots. It's robotic.
Right. They're just going through the motions, and this is another day at work, blah, 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 blah. And then there are people who are real people who you can tell that, by what they say, how they say it, that, they really are saying this from their heart, their gut, wherever it comes from. Could be from John, from a woman with comfy shoes. It could be any of those places. You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you mean.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?